Hey, folks! Welcome to episode 70 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is Matthew Summo, the writer of Dedication from the now defunct Double Take Studios. Matthew's story is fascinating as he was front and center for the rise and fall of Double Take, so I pick his brain about how that all went down. His work has also recently been featured in a FUBAR anthology. Matthew can be found online at his official website, mattsummo.com, and on Twitter at MattManBegins. Alright, short intro this week, so let's get right to it. Here is episode 70 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Matthew Summo. So, alright, so what, like I was just, in our kind of like a pre-intro thing here, saying, I usually ask someone to kind of describe their book, but I think your experience with, you had written Dedication, which was one of 10 titles that kicked off this Double Take shared universe that spun out of Night of the Living Dead from George Romero, and I'm just so curious about this, because this was like such an awesome thing, it's such a cool idea, and then it just kind of like sputtered, unfortunately, but let's start with Dedication then. So I guess that was, again, one of 10 titles, there were launch titles, they all launched at the same exact time, so how would you describe Dedication first, and then we'll kind of branch out into what like the overall George Romero world was?
Totally. Dedication was essentially about a bunch of kids working the overnight shift at a grocery store during the Night of the Living Dead. So that's pretty much the elevator pitch for the book. Mm-hmm. It's partly I had a lot of experience in my formative years of working in retail, so it's kind of sprung from that.
Yeah, that's I feel like everyone should at least take at least a few months to work in retail, because I think you'll have a much deeper appreciation for the people that are ringing you up at a cash register every day. If you at least work there a little bit. Yeah, I spent about 5 years working in retail myself, so yeah, I totally understand. Felt like a zombie a lot of those times as well.
Oh my god, so much.
So this kind of shared universe thing, it all kicked off. I remember I had backed the first Kickstarter campaign that they did for the first issues, and then I had gotten some of I had gotten the collections afterwards for review purposes, so I got like all 10 of them, and they were like, "Oh, we'll just give them to you at New York Comic Con." And I'm like, I don't want to carry around 10 trade paperbacks right now. Like, is that like, oh, we'll ship them to you? I'm like, thank God, because I'm like, I'm just imagining like stopping by the booth. Oh, wait, cool. Like, thunk, and then
let me carry this 10-pound weight in my bag.
Yeah, this sounds like a great idea. But it seemed like there seemed like there were a lot of cooks in this kitchen. For all the books, it seemed like, for at least just judging from like the credits alone, like, I mean, I see like there's a story credit and a script credit. You're listed as one of the writers in the script, but there's like 4 other people in there. So was this kind of like a writer's room kind of setup?
Yeah,
how did that work?
It was definitely not traditional. It wasn't like, I think the first issue was the only issue that I wrote a full script on. Everything after that, it was like really, it was interesting because they created storyboards and then I would have to add the dialogue to it. So it was a lot of like, I had to take a lot of trips into Manhattan to go to the office, and, I would meet with the editorial staff and Bill, and we would kind of hash out, every issue, what needed to happen. And then they would have storyboards like pretty much right after that. Like, they were really big. So one of the things Bill wanted to really push, like the mobile comics and a mobile platform that they were trying to develop. Cause he was like, everyone has a phone in their pocket, so why wouldn't people read comics on their phone? So all of our books were really kind of made more so for that mobile platform than they were for printed books, which I guess you can kind of tell, because a lot of the panels moved. So like, if you're reading it digitally, like you could see the motion happening. It wasn't like a full traditional motion comic, but it had very limited motion to it.
Yeah, and it's funny because like when you look at it in print, like there are times where it's like this panel looks like it's like blown up, like someone took it, like the proportions don't like it was like expanded past like its maximum size or something like that. But like in understanding, like, oh, okay, no, you wanted them to. It's almost like Stella was something different, but it's like that kind of idea. but like adding motion to it and stuff like that. I forgot, like, what was it? Marvel had someone like these kind of like motion-y comics. I forgot what they called them, but like stuff like that where it's like, no, use the digital medium for what it is and not just like, here's a bunch of JPEGs stringed together. Like, you could take that and actually make it almost animated. Like, you could take one panel and you can have the characters move a little bit, gesticulate with their hands, and change the dialogue in that one, Infinite Comics. That's the word. That's what Marvel called them. Infinite Comics. But that was the idea. So like you might like open up a book and it says like the counter on the site or the app says it's like 60 pages, but it's really just like, you know, a normal sized comic book that just has the dialogue is broken up like it's animation or something.
Correct. Yeah. And think about it like this. Have you ever read a comic in like Comixology?
Yeah, of course.
A lot of books really are not made for digital. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like trying to, I mean, they do a really good job. Comixology really does. But it's not, there's something to be said about page layouts and things like that. So like it doesn't. A lot of comics have a hard time translating from the page to like the digital format. Where, funnily enough, like our book had a hard time translating from the digital format to the page because they weren't made for the page. They were made for the mobile player first. That's why we had those issues where. Like you said, panels were grainy because they were blown up like past their size and stuff like that. And that's the other thing too, is that all of the work on our books was digital. There was no like, unfortunately, I don't own like any original art from any of the books. I wish I did, but there was, because it was all digital, it was all storyboarded digitally.
Mm-hmm. And this process sounds really interesting because it's almost like a reverse Marvel method. Where, like, instead of just like, oh, here's a rough idea for the script, and then, like, you know, you get the images, it's like, well, no, we're starting with the images and then kind of, like, backing into it, and then you wrote a script based off of the images that were in there, sort of. It sounds really, it sounds very challenging.
Yeah, it was weird, because, again, I'm filling in dialogue for scenes that I haven't written. I mean, we've talked about it, like, we always plan out, like, what's going to happen, but... You know, there's stuff on the page where I had to kind of fit dialogue into the scene, and I also had to work around in the first like 3 issues. So Bill hired these storytellers, these moth storytellers, these people who will go up like live on stage and tell like really interesting stories, and they're really good at it. So a lot of times I had to fit, like we had one moth story that someone else wrote in the first 3, and then I wrote one for the last 2. So in the first 3 issues, I had to write around that sort of. So that was kind of challenging. It's basically, you know, I'm writing around this one character that's kind of monologuing through the whole book, which is super strange.
Yeah.
But it was nice to be able to like be given the reins to write my own in the last 2, and I kind of tailored it to the job, which was nice because the first one there was just like some story that Moth storyteller, I guess, tells on stage that they licensed from them.
Oh, okay. See, that makes so much more sense now, because I remember those, like, kind of, like, oddball stories sometimes, and it's like, it goes, like, this story that just kind of, like, keeps going, and it's like, what does this have to do with what's going on? And, like, I got, like, really thrown off by it, because I'm like, is this important? Like, is this anecdotal? Is it just, like, this is a cool story? So, like, those were things that I'm like, and I'll be completely frank with you. Like, I wanted so much to like this like overall universe, and it just like I just read it and I got like so confused by it, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm just like I don't get the joke, or like I don't understand what it's gonna happen, or if I read them in the wrong order or something like that, and I'm just like everything on paper, this should have been gangbusters. Like I should have just been going nuts over this, and I just like kept reading, and I'm like, I don't totally get this, and I'm not signaling, you know, you out, singling you out or anything like that. I didn't invite you on the show to be like, yeah, and what did you do on page 37 of this book? It's more of just like you know, like I said before, I'm like, I'm so curious as to like what this process is. So like in hearing you talk about these stories and the storyboards and stuff like that, it is very interesting, because it sounds like, you know, it started with the best of intentions, and then just, I don't know if it got away or it's just too many cooks in the kitchen or what, but it's very interesting.
I would say it was probably too many cooks in the kitchen. We had different artists like there's a murderer's row of artists on the books.
It's
like
insane.
they're all different. I mean, to their credit, we tried to follow a certain art style. Like there are different, but in my book especially, like it kind of stays relatively the same. But it was just a lot of too many moving parts.
Yeah.
It wasn't as simple as writer writes a script and then it goes to the penciler, and then inker, color, etc. So it was challenging, but the ultimate tragedy, I think, and I don't mean to use ultimate because that's Bill's thing.
I see what you did there.
The tragedy is that towards the end, we were really starting to refine it. We had went from 10 books to like a solid 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had like 4 books that we were going to put out after that. And then was kind of, some were going to continue the stories, and then some were going to be all new stories, but still kind of set in the same universe, but like a little bit in the future. It was going to be interesting, but of course it came to an abrupt end.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's what I also wanted, because it's like, 10 issues to launch an entire franchise, like that's ambitious. And like, in even reading some of them, I'm like, was this story necessary? Like, do we really need this one if we also had like this? There was a radio DJ, there was an army people, there were doctors, and then it's like, all right, so there's all these different aspects. Do you need all those POVs on this story right out of the gate, or are these like smaller tales that you can kind of like weave in down the line? And I think like I said, best of intentions in terms of starting out, but like might have just been like a little too aggressive to right out of the gate to launch an entire universe off of it.
Yeah, and that was the key word in your sentence was aggressive. Bill really wanted to come to market like super strong, like, oh, we're going to have 10 books out at one time. But here's the problem was like a lot of retailers, and I spent a lot of time going to retailers and talking to them about our books, and a lot of them are like, 10 books at once, like really, what am I supposed to do with, I need 10 spaces for other books, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of partly why they did like the super packs, which is a cool idea. It introduces that binge reading concept, but it's a lot when it's not as refined. Like some of the books you can tell are like a lot more refined than the other ones are. So I feel like people like yourself, like kind of were just like, what is happening? Why are there so many books? Like, and why do some feel like they could have just been side stories and the other ones didn't? I think it was just, we were spread so thin that it was kind of hard to maintain. And that's why, towards the end, we kind of narrowed the focus a bit. Yeah.
And it's like, and that's awesome, because that way it's like, okay, like, yeah, you could streamline this a little bit. You do a few of the stories, and then you start. It's almost like looking at the Marvel movies versus the DC movies, right? The Marvel started with Iron Man, and then they built up to Avengers, and then DC's like, nah, screw it, we're gonna start with Justice League, and it's like, whoa, like maybe you pump the brakes there just a little bit. Walk before you can run there. So yeah, it's just like I said. I feel like there's like a cool documentary in this whole thing, where it's like,
it would have been fascinating, honestly. That was like project number. I mean, when I jumped on, we had worked on like 3 or 4 other story ideas that didn't go anywhere, and I think before that they had worked on like 2 or 3, including like Take-Two interactive properties like BioShock and XCOM, like, which unfortunately didn't go anywhere. I was like salivating because I would go in the office and they had on the wall, they had somebody do like full 11 by 14 like pages, like huge splash pages of like storyboards for BioShock book. Like it was cool because it was like rendered as if you're like first person view, like the game, and somebody has a shotgun and they're facing off with a Big Daddy. And it was like, every time I'd walk in the office, I would just sit there, like we would be in a meeting, I would just be staring at the art on the wall, like what could have been, you know what I mean? And So that was heartbreaking. And also the crazy thing about the BioShock thing, or any of the Take-Two properties, is at one point they had met with GameStop just about carrying our books in general.
Mm-hmm.
And GameStop had said, if you do a licensed book, like we'll buy like one copy for every one copy of the game that we buy.
Oh, wow.
So like if we would have did, let's say, Theft Auto, for example, like we would have been in the black like instantly.
Oh yeah, that would be nuts.
Yeah. So unfortunately, like none of that stuff panned out. So that's why they found, that Night of the Living Dead was famously in the public domain. That's how. Yeah.
So, how did you get involved in that process? Was this like was this your first like official, I guess, published work?
So my first work for hire. Prior to that, I had self-published a one-shot back in 2009, and then I had weirdly enough, I was like browsing Indeed one day and saw that Take-Two was looking for like comic book editors, and I'm like, I could do that. Like I put together a comic book from start to finish. I basically did everything but draw it. I lettered it, formatted it, the whole nine. So I was like, I could do this. So I sent Take-Two a copy of my book with like my resume and all this stuff, and they took it like as if I was sending a writing sample, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to write for us?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." Like, like why would I say no to that? And then I was brought aboard, and again, like this is in the early stages when they were working on they're working on a couple of different story ideas that obviously, like I said, didn't go anywhere. But then I think it was like a year later, they had discovered the Night of the Living Dead, and that's where that basically starts off.
Wow. So it's like, you're just like browsing for a job, just like casual, like, all right, what do I, if you're still in retail, then you're looking at like, okay, am I going to find an assistant manager position at, Walgreens or something? And then you're like, oh, comic book editor. Yeah, all right. And then you end up getting swept up in this whole process. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. Like it legitimately, like from the word go, it was probably like the weirdest, like most surreal experience of my life. It's crazy to be under the tutelage of Bill Jemas, as divisive as a character in comic book history as he is. Like he's still like, he did save Marvel, to his credit. Ultimate Spider-Man. He has an eye for talent, obviously, with Brian Bendis and Mark Millar. Like he knows his stuff. So it was really just from the beginning and to the end, it was just insane. Like I can't say enough. Like, don't get me wrong, it was challenging. Obviously, again, there were so many cooks and so many different visions. That was hard, but it was, I look back on it fondly. Mm-hmm. It was crazy, but it was like a good kind of crazy. And it, it opened up a lot of doors for me too, which is nice.
Yeah, really. I mean, like everyone has their own kind of story about how they got into comics, and you potentially have one of the stranger ones out there. Like you answered an ad, and then all of a sudden you're writing a comic book for something like, that's kind of nuts.
Yeah, it is nuts. But it's like, I think, I forget who said it, but a creator had said like, there's no like one way to break into comics. Just when somebody does, they like patch up the hole.
Yeah.
After they do it, and you can't like break in that way ever again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's like such a weird, elusive industry like that. Because like, especially, I think it's getting a little bit better now with the rise of self-publishing and Kickstarter and stuff like that. But like, and I guess like I've read some editorials recently that were like, if you don't get paid on time, like, well, yeah, that's just how we do it. It's like, if you don't like it, you can get labeled negative, and then they just don't work with you again, because there's dozens of, or if not hundreds of people out there that will be clamoring for a chance to write in comics and work in comics. So it's like, it's kind of shitty in that regard, but like,
Mhm.
there is that like urge for it. And then it's also on the other side of the equation really frustrating because like, you can have a book, a big book from a smaller publisher sells like 10,000 copies, and it's like, but like what you said with Grand Theft Auto before, that was selling what, millions of copies. Like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like it's an entirely different world, and it's like crazy to think like how much people love this medium, and then just how like little the the footprint is in reality. Like, and I say that as someone that focuses almost entirely on horror comics, which is a niche within a niche. There.
It is super super niche. But yeah, it's funny how easy it is now. Like, the best line I've heard about breaking into comics is like, if you want to break into comics, just make comics.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier now to make comics than it ever was. You know what I mean? Because it's so easy to find like-minded people, artists everywhere, and just to put something out, print on demand. It's a lot easier than it ever was. But on the flip side, like you had said, you have to, it's harder in that now you have to maintain like a presence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as far as like social media and stuff like that goes, like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen stories about this creator did this on social media,
Yeah.
they did that, and then all of a sudden, like, that's a black mark on you forever.
Well, and not only that, but like you have to do everything. So it's like, all right, you may write the book, and then you could get an artist and a colorist and a letterer to put those other aspects of it together, but you're the one sourcing printers and getting shipping taken care of, your marketing, your promotions, your all, editing, editors, your public relations, your HR, if you're dealing with issues between your artists. It's like all those things that fall on one person's shoulders. Where you work with a publisher, you have all those are separate departments, So it's like, hey, I didn't get paid in time. Well, there's a finance guy you could talk to, and they would clear that up, hopefully. It's like those are that's the ins and outs with it, I guess. But if you love the medium, you just want to tell stories, like there is an avenue there, and people have been able to build their own living by doing those things. It's just it can be slow going at first.
Of course. It's worth it, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we all love comics, man. Like,
Yeah.
So I know you said you were when Take-Two was originally looking at things like BioShock and stuff, like, you were salivating over the images there, but how excited were you when it jumped to Night of the Living Dead? Is this a franchise that's been a focus of you for a bit?
Yeah, that was the thing. The funny thing about that is, before they had gotten or discovered the Night of the Living Dead was in public domain, I had kind of walked away because we were like working on stuff again. It wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to kind of do my own thing. And then I think I read like an article on Bleeding Cool or something where they were like, Take-Two is going to do Night of the Living Dead comics. So I'd reached out to the editor that I was working with previously, and I was like, dude, like, who do I have to kill, like, to get on this, like, these books? Like, seriously, I will do whatever it takes. And he had talked to Bill, and they knew, like, my background, because they saw my resume, so they knew my background. They were like, what do you think about doing a book set in a supermarket? And I was like, of course. Like, why wouldn't I want to do that? I think it's a great idea. Bill was like, listen, you have an ear for dialogue. Like, we want to make this as authentic as possible. So I of course jumped at the chance. I mean, that movie, I'll never forget seeing that movie for the first time with a buddy of mine. He's like, listen, you got to watch this movie. He's like, it has one of the greatest endings of all time. And I mean, I'm not going to spoil it. You should have seen it if you haven't seen it.
The movie's like 50 years old, at least by this point. So,
but like, He's Dead, Shoot Him in the Head is like amazing. Like, what an incredible way to end that movie. And it just blew me away. So once they were like, we got this, I'm like, I got to get on here because this is like, it's an incredible opportunity to kind of play in that world, The funny thing, this never really made it to print, but the character His name was Michael Tripp Jones. He was named after Dwayne Jones, who played Ben in Night of the Living Dead. So that was kind of my homage to the movie. I tried so hard to sneak in a reference to Shaun of the Dead. Had a character named Sean. Somebody asked him about where he was going that night. He said he was going to go to the bar with Liz, and they had a conversation about how Liz hates the bar. But it didn't. It's funny, nobody called me out on it, but they were just like, "Can you cut this? Like, it just doesn't work." And I'm like, I guess.
It's funny that that's, you know, like, not to poke fun, but it's like, you know, that's what they decide to cut, where it's like, you know, you have these like sweeping stories about, you know, anything else, and it's like, no, that's got to stay there. But like, you know, you're this thing. Who's Liz? Why is she going to the bar? I don't know. Like,
who cares? But, I just wanted to be like, it's a reference to Shaun of the Dead. Like, can we just keep it? But I was like, whatever. Like, I'm not going to make waves.
It'll kill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you think had everything not kind of like fallen apart ish? Where do you think your story would have gone? Would it have continued?
Yeah, so that was a cool thing. We actually had the first issue of the continuation of Dedication completed. It's not, I can't say completed. It was like 95% done. Mm-hmm. It was like right at the end of the storyboard phase. So what was going to happen is we were going to fast forward to the future, and George, Tripp, and God, why can't I think of names today? Hang on, I'm gonna. And Joey, George, Tripp, and Joey are still alive because they had gotten the what do we call those little worm things that were in the books, that kept, you know, that brought the dead back to life. They were going to keep our characters immortal, and they were what gave the characters powers. So basically, it was going to be like kind of like the X-Men, because our characters started getting powers towards the end. So it was going to be like the X-Men, but set it in a supermarket instead of like a mansion in Westchester. Mm-hmm. So it was going to be really interesting. I mean, we only got as far as the first issue, but it was cool, like flashing forward and getting to like play around in modern time instead of being handcuffed, you know, to the 60s. But obviously, you know, like you said, it fell apart pretty swiftly. Yeah.
I mean, I have to tell you, like, that superhero angle was like the superpower angle. I was like, wait, are there like aliens, or is this like that was another part that threw me, because I was like, okay, like there wasn't like much of a warning for that, and it's just like, oh, here's the thing. Like, it would be like watching, like, you know, Schindler's List or something, and then, like, Godzilla shows up, and it's like, this is the ultimate Holocaust. You're like, whoa. This took a really weird turn in the third act here. Like, I didn't see that one coming at all. So, like I said, like, so many, like, such potential, such, like, cool things that we could have, that could have come from this, and I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, like, but I guess in look at, like, Night of the Living Dead's still public domain, so like there's nothing, you know, potentially stopping someone from trying this again, because like, yeah, they can't do these same exact stories, but you know, they could take another crack at expanding the Night of the Living Dead universe, right? Mm-hmm. So,
in theory, I mean, this is now, I think, what, the second or third time that a Night of the Living Dead based series had come about. I mean, again, we tried to do a little something different, which, you know, had cool ideas, like you said, but didn't go anywhere. But I think, I don't know. I think that it's been, that well is dry.
Yeah, you know,
that's the nicest way I could put it.
Yeah, and I think zombies are starting to wane a bit if they haven't already. Like, you know, monsters, I think they go in these like phases. So like, I think they reached peak popularity when like The Walking Dead, like, you know, season 2 or 3 or something, and now it's on like season 8 or 9 or something like that. So it's like, I think that'll start to wane down, and like even now, like, you know, it's funny, my editor like flat out refuses to. He personally won't read any zombie stories. He's like, no, like, I'm done with it. You know, he hands those off to everyone else because he's like, I can't deal with any zombie stories now. Like, I'm up to here with zombie stories. So, It's like that kind of thing. Like I can understand where it's just like, you just get fed up. I think what's weird, I think the monsters that have risen lately have been witches and golems, oddly, which was something like I hadn't seen before too much. And then like 2 or 3 years ago, like every other story I read had a golem in it. And I'm like, all right, like that's the new thing. Like we're going to go with this. But witches, I think, starting with like Scott Snyder and Jock's witches, and then like all of a sudden like there were a bunch of like new witch stories that have popped up. I think they're on that crest right now about like, yeah, we're gonna be the age of witches next.
Great.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that can get eaten to the ground. It's funny though, because now that makes me think about what James Cameron had said recently about the Marvel movies, like how he's like done with Marvel movies. He thinks that people are getting like, are we getting fatigued? Like, I disagree with his statement because they've been so good.
Yeah, I think
you can't get fatigued with something that you're like eagerly anticipating.
Yes. And I think there's the potential to be fatigued, and like you can look, not every movie's going to be Black Panther, like you're going to have you're gonna have some Batman versus Supermans, and it's like you get all those other ones, but like I think we're gonna get fatigued from things like Jonah Hex and Green Lantern. I'm sorry, DC. I'm not picking on you, but there's a lot to choose from when it comes to let's pick a bad superhero movie, Catwoman. We could go on and on, but you can look at that, but when it comes to putting out that level of quality that Marvel's been doing, but even then, I don't know what it is. They have this weird hypnosis that people go under when they get into that theater, because I remember seeing Iron Man 2 or Avengers Age of Ultron in the theater and be like, this was great, and then I got 3 months later I'm like, did I really like that movie? I saw it and I remember it, but was it as great as I don't know if it was just I got blown away by something by the time I saw it on home video or whatever, but when you're in the theater, when you're in there, it's this experience that is only rivaled perhaps by Star Wars. So it's I don't care what's happening. I'm in the theater. I'm loving this. This is I'm just a child in that theater now, and you got all my money. Just take it all and I'm fine. And I don't know what it is, but maybe that's just it. But in any case, keep going. If they want to keep doing this, I will keep paying until until they stop making them. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if until it reaches levels of, as you said, Catwoman, Green Lantern, Batman vs Superman, Justice League, I'm going to be there day one. You're going to take my money. You're going to get my money when it comes out on home video. I don't care. It's so good. You're not going to fatigue you. However, I do want to mention that I'm already fatigued by the Avatar sequels that haven't come out yet. I'm tired of hearing them talk about it. That movie was not that great. It was okay. It was really 3D wise, the 3D was amazing, but was it really worth 4 sequels and a park of its own at Disney?
But none of those have happened. So. None of those have happened. So it's it's one thing. It's so now look, and not to pick on Jim Cameron, because he's made some truly fantastic movies, like Terminator 2 and True Lies and all this other shit. But he now kind of sounds like that guy who's I'm gonna make this thing, that weirdo at the convention who's oh yeah, I got this great idea for a comic, but then make it, just shit or get off the pot,
Stop, right? Stop talking about it. No one wants to hear you talk about it. We want to see it actually happen.
So,
but then he's that person. He's that person at the con that sees something similar or as grandiose as what he pictures his magnum opus to be, and he's like, "Well, people are getting tired. That's ridiculous. They should just stop doing that because something else should come out, something with these giant cats should come out, a sequel that I talked about almost 10 years ago should come out."
Yeah, not for another, but I haven't even, I still haven't even seen Avatar, but I have seen Fern Gully and Pocahontas, so I feel like I've seen it, but from what I understand, there's something in it called unobtainium. That's what you went with, man? come on, like adamantium at least sounds weird. Like, you know, it sounds vibranium is a thing. Like, all right, I'm going with it. Like, I get it's some mystical metal, but like unobtainium, like it's a bit on the nose there, Jim. Like, come on,
yeah,
man.
and also like that movie was like 3 and change. I'll be honest, I saw it in the theater once, never watched it again.
Yeah.
Like, and have zero desire to ever watch that movie. Ever.
So here's a question. Let's say Jim Cameron is making a comic book universe and he's looking for writers. Would you take a crack at it?
I mean, I'm not gonna say no. And I like no. I feel like no writer would. It's, you know, you're not going to turn down work.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to make that Avatar, absolutely not. But if you wanted to do something else, maybe like Terminator, maybe. But yeah, Avatar, no way. Hands down, no way.
Yeah. I'm just curious.
You know,
I'm like playing devil's advocate. Like, yeah, we could talk a good game here, but like if he comes calling, he's like, here's all the money. We're gonna make it. We want unobtainium to be like we're gonna make a mini series all about the origin of unobtainium and these cat people. Like, want you to write it. Like, you know, you take a shot. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like if that's a work for hire gig. Like, I feel like that's like the story. Like, do you follow Kevin Smith at all?
Oh yeah.
Like you ever that story where like he went out and filmed something with Prince years ago, and it's like you're never gonna see it, yes. But like he got one hell of a story from it. You know, it's like I feel like you might do that just for the experience to be like, I gotta see what the hell this is gonna happen, because like, you know, the guy's I'm probably gonna sit in a submarine and go and look at, you know, at the Titanic wreckage before I have to get to write this for some reason, you know?
Yeah, to pass a trial. In order to, I mean, all right. So let me backtrack a little bit. I would think very hard about it, and I think you're right. I think at the end, like, my ultimate decision would probably be yes, just to get the story out of it. I feel like I've lived my life doing that. Like, oh, this is gonna be a great story.
Mm-hmm. And
it's led me, some pretty interesting places. I haven't been harmed yet, but it's fun. You should take a gamble with your life. That's not going to hurt anybody or yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
Yeah, well said. But you this wasn't your only dabbling in comics, so at least in horror comics specifically. You also you had a story in a recent FUBAR anthology, correct?
Yeah, All-Star FUBAR, which is like right on the cusp of coming out. It was actually supposed to come out today, but I think it's not even back from the printer yet, so it should be within like the next couple weeks. Jeff McComsey, who is like the editor-in-chief of FUBAR, it's his creation. He wrote Z-Men for Double Take.
Yeah,
so that's kind of where we met.
I did an interview with him like when they were coming out, so it was like sitting
nice.
like awkwardly in the Double Take booth of like all these people like coming and like chugging, like, no, I don't work here. I'm talking to this guy for like 5 minutes. Like, back up for a second.
So yeah, that's where him and I met, and I had asked him like just in passing. I'm like, dude, like, how does it work? Like for FUBAR, you know, do you guys do submissions? Like, what's the status there? And he's like, well, you know, I usually just reach out to people. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I didn't think anything of it. And then he launched All-Star FUBAR, and he had like reached out to me. He's like, Liz, do you want to write something for this? I was like, of course I do. Like, mm-hmm. You know, I love the idea of moments in history, you know, with zombies. So I had pitched him 2 stories. One was about Teddy Roosevelt, called Night of the Living Ted, which didn't go anywhere, thankfully, because it wasn't. It wasn't. I gotta be honest. Like, I had one story in my head, and when he had asked me for 2 pitches, I was like, I got this one that like I'm real fired up about, but I have to like kind of come up with a second one. Mm-hmm. So I really forced it. Like, I'm going to be honest with myself. I was just like, you know, I'm from Long Island. Like, Teddy Roosevelt is like a big part of Long Island history. Like, let me just write a story about him, because why wouldn't I? So wasn't my best. But then on the other hand, the story that I was fired up about was the story that eventually got accepted, called Red Flag, which is about the pirate queen Ching Shi. She was a former sex worker who had become a pirate queen and like ran this whole fleet of ships called the Red Flag Fleet, and she had like a stranglehold over the South China Sea.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, she sounds pretty badass. So I want to like write a story about this woman and, you know, kind of throw zombies into the mix. So that's pretty much like the short elevator pitch for that book. Is she notices a ship for the East India Trading Company is in her domain of the South China Sea, and they instantly surrender, and mayhem ensues.
Cool. So that, yeah, because I think FUBAR is now partnered with Alterna Comics. So I guess like that is that officially coming out? Because I know they've also done the Kickstarter route for a number of these.
Yeah, so they kickstart them first, but then they officially go through Diamond. They get solicited. Okay. This one did get solicited, so it's good. But it's like on a delay because I know Jeff just on top of doing this just finished a book for Image that he drew called Sun Pillar, which looks amazing. If anyone out there hasn't seen it, it looks amazing. It's his art is like at its peak. So I highly recommend that. But yeah, this is kind of something he was working on at the same time. So I think it was just a matter of, you know, submitting that to the printer and then printing delays and things like that. But it is on track, I think, within the next like week or so to be released.
Yeah, I mean, by the time this goes up, it'll definitely be out there. Then we'll link to that in the show notes. That one's, you said it was All-Star?
Yeah, All-Star FUBAR. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's basically everyone that has worked on FUBAR before, other people that haven't, and because they're all different timelines in the other FUBAR anthology. So this is kind of like a mashup of everything that has come before in one book. Like there was one book for like World War I, one for World War II, one for like just Western Civ in general, and then this one is kind of like all that stuff. There's stories in different times in one book.
Yeah, I backed a few of his Kickstarters, and I think the first 2 volumes were like one of the first books I had reviewed on Horror Talk. So it was like, you know, I go way back on the FUBAR train there.
Yeah, it's such a cool idea, and I feel like it's more so about the history and the characters that are in the stories than it is about zombies. Like the zombies in my story are like, they're in the book for maybe 2 pages, 3 pages total. Mm-hmm. For the 8-page story. They're not really, it's just kind of like background. You know, there's like a quick action scene and then they're done. It's more so about this queen, Qingxi, and how just incredibly intimidating she is.
Now, how much research do you do for a thing like that? Like, how did you find this person in history? And it sounds like almost like something you could be stumbling across or something. You're like, oh, this sounds like it. You know, something it could spin into a big story.
Yeah, it was like a name I had heard, just like in the ether. I had heard like of this woman Qingxi, and I was like, oh, let me like look into who she was, and I just fell down the rabbit hole for like her whole history, and I was just fascinated by this woman who kind of like pulled herself out of like the worst time of her life and became like this super successful pirate queen, you know. And I was like, it felt just ripe for storytelling, and I'm actually hoping to maybe kind of spin off from that story and maybe do something else with it and with her, because I just think she's such a great character, and it's cool that she was real. But I feel like, you know, we can do a lot of fun stuff with that character and her history.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like she's basically public domain in that case. But if you're kind of doing historical fiction there, like there's a lot of opportunity. That's another genre that seems to be kind of blowing up lately too, is the historical fiction idea.
Yeah, I was like obsessed with it. So I went on like a little bit of a strong female character bender. Mm-hmm. My sister passed away from brain cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In 2014. Thank you. And I was just like, you know, I feel like, because she was a strong person. I'm like, I want to like represent her as a person in like different characters, you know, and how just strong she was. I want to make strong characters, kind of like a tribute to her. So I was like, I wrote a piece for a charity anthology called Manchester Unbreakable about like a superpowered female who overcomes adversity. And then this came along, and I was like, she is perfect for this. And now I'm working on something else. I'm working on 2 other creator-owned stuff that's kind of more of a tribute to her and just strong females in general.
That's great, man. That's like, it's a great way to kind of keep her memory alive too, and pay tribute to, you know, who she was. That's really great. And you get to write comics, and
yes,
and, you know, that's also fun.
That's the best part.
Yeah, because that was going to be like one of my cheesy interview questions to ask. Like, well, all right, so like you've had these experiences. What else is next? So it sounds like you have some things in the hopper, but maybe nothing that we could talk about just yet.
Yeah, nothing that's like concrete. I have the one creator-owned thing that's really it's really the super beginning stages. Like I have an artist that I'm working with, but it's very, very early. Like we're working on like a pitch, nothing substantial just yet. And if I can't pitch it, obviously we'll Kickstarter or whatever. But yeah, just kind of taking it as it comes along. Ant's really big right now, so any of those that I can jump into, I'll definitely take the reins and just kind of run with it. I'm working on something now for an anthology that's upcoming, excuse me. And, like I said, we'll just see where it takes me.
Yeah. But like, look, you want to make comics, you're in there. So, I mean, that's
it. There's nothing, there's nothing to it but to do it, like just get out there, like write and create, find like-minded people. The comic industry is great. Everyone's like really super supportive.
Yeah.
And it's just a very welcoming community. And it's inspiring because it's not like, sometimes you work jobs where there are cliques and things like that. I never felt that way in comics. Like, you could talk to people that are writing from the big 2 and, they treat you like you're equals, not like you're, some peon who has like one self-published book. Like you guys just talk as people. Everyone, it's very friendly, it's very welcoming. I really like that about the comics community.
Yeah, it is. While it is somewhat small, it's still something that is, incredibly inclusive and welcoming. I think like 99.999% of the people I've met in this industry have been really awesome. There's like 1 or 2 bad apples, but like, I could count on one hand, like the amount, like, I mean, I don't even need the whole thing, all the whole hand, but it's like, if you have questions, like, especially with like Twitter, like, it's ridiculous how much like just information is there when you could just like easily reach out to someone and go like, hey, compliment all the time, guys. Like, it's, if you like a book, talk about it. Like, it's, it's something that I think is really beneficial there because those creators do see it, and it's like, it's something I didn't realize, like, as I was writing reviews for a while, and like, I was like, I'm kind of like throwing this stuff out into the ether, and then like, I would meet a creator at the convention, I'm like, oh, I work for Horror Talk, and they're like, oh, yeah, I know your stuff, like, we did this, and I was like, oh, like, holy shit, you saw that, like, okay, like, they do, they might not, like, always reply to something like that, but like, that does get out there, and it's important, but like, you can ask a question, you could throw stuff out there, be like, hey, what do you think about this, or, I really like your work here, where did that come from, or something, and so sometimes you'll get an answer, sometimes you won't, but like, especially if you're complimentary, usually people will reply to that kind of stuff, and that's ranging from everything from, like you said, big 2 publisher, like people that are like huge in the industry, to people that are, just starting out, like, we're all in this together, this comic journey kind of thing, and it's like, I'm glad to see that most of them recognize that it's like, it's what is it, the rising tide, raises all ships, that kind of thing, where it's like, I'm not really good at analogies, but,
I think that's pretty close to what it is. I don't recall what it is either, but yeah, close.
Yeah, if one person succeeds like that, that could open the door for someone else too. It's like, we're all in this together. It's not like it's like, well, no, man, that guy got it. Well, now we can never get, comics, this person can never get in the industry. Like, it doesn't work that way, and it's so just inclusive and fun.
Yeah, there's room for everybody. I remember I had reached out to Bendis, and he doesn't know that I worked for Bill. Like, doesn't know. I never met him, but I just reached out because Bill had told me a story that the first draft, the first draft of Ultimate Spider-Man #1 was like the first. Like, they didn't have any notes. They just said, okay, this is great, and we're gonna put. And I had asked him, I'm like, is that true? Like, that was a first draft? And he said, maybe the first draft that they saw. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Like, I would do that too. I would like write draft number like 37 on my files to make it seem like I did 37 drafts. I maybe might have did 3. But he probably worked on that issue night and day and did a billion drafts, and then finally turned it in. They were just like, yeah, this is great. And he was just like, okay, cool.
Would you have an ideal licensed product that you would want to take a crack at?
It changes day to day. Right now, I really want to do. This is kind of like, I think, my dream right now. I really want to do a Rick and Morty, and I want to do like a riff on Nightmare on Elm Street, like a Dream Warriors kind of story, because I just think like the two are just, it's ripe for parody, and I think it would be amazing. And then that, I mean, I would do like some like a WWE story. I really want to do something Power Rangers. I feel like Boom is killing it right now. The Power Ranger stuff, like the Shattered Grid, all that stuff is amazing. And that, I feel they're really the only thing they're missing. And I've been pretty vocal about this on Twitter, is they need to do the next big event they do next needs to be like a crossover with like Masked Rider, VR Troopers, Big Bad Beetleborgs, like Superhuman Samurai, Cyber Squad,
all the FUBAR brands, yeah,
everything. Like, they need to just do like this huge, like super duper, like never going to happen in real life, like giant crossover. I would love to do something like that. It sounds like that sounds like something I would never get any sleep for, because I would just be up like, writing, like sweating over my laptop and just crushing, like, drinking Monster and Red Bull, just swearing and sweating on my computer. But I would love just to make something like that happen. I'm like obsessed with that idea too. So that's kind of in the back of my head. I wouldn't even know. The funny thing is like, I wouldn't even know how to even approach like an editor to be like, I have this cool idea, and it would work. I would look like that meme of Charlie Day, and I think it was It Always Sunny. He's like pointing at the wall with all the papers. That would be me, like just pointing at different pictures of characters from the Saban brands, like. And then we got Masked Rider over here, and he's doing this with his motorcycle, and then like.
And then the villain of it all is the Venus de Milo turtle from the live action Next Mutation Ninja Turtle series they did. It all comes together, but then you probably gotta get IDW involved. Like, oh man, but like that was a Saban show, so that might be a loophole. Like, there's options there.
Yeah, it would be just a nightmare. They'd be like, somebody just get this like sweaty writer like away from me, because of course I would like probably pitch it like the middle of New York Comic Con, like just on the show floor. Like, let me speak to an editor. I just gotta tell him about my idea about the Saban brands. We gotta cross them over. We gotta bring them together.
You sound like Bruce Willis and 12 Monkeys trying to explain, like, no, this is what we're gonna do. Like, we gotta save this.
It would be pretty much exactly like that. It'd be embarrassing.
But hey, man, you gotta start somewhere. So it could lead to some crazy story. It's like an after my third restraining order, they finally caved in, and I got to make the crossover that all these 90s failed TV shows that you all know and love. That was when Avengers fatigue set in, because everyone wanted to read about VR Troopers again. That's it.
They wanted to know the backstory of that weird, like, Elvis-looking genie from Beetleborgs. The Elvis Jay Leno mashup.
Jay Leno, yeah. What the hell was up with that guy? This, like, weird rockabilly outfit. Where it's like, and he lives with, like, a mummy and a Dracula. Like, he lives with, like, the Monster Squad. Like, What? Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I have very fond memories of that series myself, so I understand, because, like, I think all the DVDs are out of print, so now they cost, like, $800, but I'm like, but why do they, like, no one wanted these when they were in print, and now they don't make them anymore, so now suddenly the price is ridiculous?
That's it, man. It's like weaponized nostalgia.
See, that is an awesome title, man. Oh, that could be the title of your crossover. I love it. That's an awesome phrase. Oh man. All right, we're gonna put a cork in that, because I don't know how we can top weaponized nostalgia. I'm gonna write that down. That's really good, man.
Thanks.
All right, so where are the best places for folks to find you online?
So I'm pretty much everywhere at the same handle. I kind of cornered the market on this handle when the movie came out. I'm at MattManBegins. Twitter, Instagram, MySpace, Friendster, like anywhere I can have that username, I have it. So please follow me on this wacky adventure of trying to pitch the ultimate Saban crossover. Weaponized nostalgia.
Cool. I don't even know what's up with, like, dedication, if that's still available anywhere. But, yeah.
That's a good question. Not really. I mean, if anybody wants to read it, like, please, by all means, just drop me a line, and I will send you. I have a PDF of the trade. I will send that to you free of charge. I've been giving that thing out, like, left and right. But, yeah, I will absolutely send it. I have a website, mattsummo.com. I have stuff up there. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Yeah, I say I'm literally holding my copy of Dedication to flip through. I was like, let me just flip through this thing again to see what this thing looked like. Yeah, this was awesome, Matt. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we had a chance to talk. You know, like, inevitably this show leads to, like, some crazy ideas for comics, and I hope and pray that at least one of them comes to fruition. But this one, I really want to see this one happen. So,
yeah, if anyone listening if anyone from Boom is listening and likes weaponized nostalgia, hit me up on the Twitter.
There we go.
And we can make it happen.
Sounds good.
Maybe we'll bring in what was that other one that wasn't a Saban, but it was like a ripoff of Power Rangers, the tattooed teenagers from Mars or something. Like,
I don't remember that. That I was thinking at first the superhero Samurai Cyber Squad. But I don't know. I know it was something like tattooed teenagers from Tuscaloosa or something like that. I don't. Yeah.
I don't think they went for the. Wait, hold on. I got it. They didn't go for the alliteration at all, and I was way off. I said tattooed teenagers from Mars. It's tattooed teenage alien fighters from Beverly Hills. I swear on my life.
Wow, that just seems like. That, like, they threw a bunch of, like, adjectives in a blender, and that was what came out.
They're just like, all right, well, they're teenagers. They're probably from Beverly Hills, because that's where all teenagers in the 90s were from. Yep. Like, of course. And also, that was a Deke Entertainment property, which I believe so is Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, which is probably why Boom has not knocked on my door, because they're like, dummy, like, we only have rights to Saban. We don't have Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad or tattooed teenage alien fighters in Beverly Hills. That title sucks.
Yeah, that's a rough title.
It's really wordy thing to say.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, folks, that does it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I've been James Ferguson with my guest Matt Summo. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.